So now we're at the third and final episode of the Trilogy, television. So for much of my childhood, I used to watch a lot of films, and TV was the place to do it, because there was always one on at some point. Usually late night, or randomly on some weekend morning. Christmas time probably had the most films on television back in the old days anyway, and they weren't all Christmas films. We used to get a TV guide that covered the 2 weeks of Christmas, and then highlight the films we want to watch, so we could either watch them or record them and watch them later. A big time for movies on television was Christmas time. You get the Christmas premieres on BBC One usually. So back before Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi were ever on television, Star Wars used to be a regular showing. I had it taped off TV from a previous showing, so I remember it being on TV again for the umpteenth time and complaining, why do they keep showing Star Wars? Little did I know how popular it was. So one year we got Indiana Jones, and that would be probably Christmas 92, because it took 3 years for a film to turn up on terrestrial television. I remember being very excited it was on, so I don't think I actually had it on VHS back then. But if I wasn't watching a film on VHS or at the cinema, I was probably watching it on TV. So in the 80s in the UK, we only had 4 channels. BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, or Channel 4, or S4C, as it was a Welsh channel where I was. The only children's programmes were on for an hour at lunchtime and an hour in the afternoon, and that's all you got, apart from a few hours on the Saturday, Sunday morning. So as a child of between 10 and 12, I was allowed to stay up very late and watch some films. And for some reason, they were horror films, and a lot of them put me right off horror for a few years, because I saw stuff like The Howling, An American Werewolf in London, and Alien, way before I was ready for it. The one thing about American Werewolf I remember is the Muppets. I thought, oh, the Muppets are on TV. So I was watching that bit, and then smash. Nazi werewolves turn up and slaughter everyone. There's something for the nightmares. And of course I saw the chestburster scene in Alien. Won't forget that anytime soon. One thing I remember quite well is the summer holidays. Off school during the 80s, what was there to watch on TV? Well, in the UK where I was, it was either Cliff Richard movies like Summer Holiday, or the old Johnny Westmuller Tarzan films, which I found quite entertaining. Now, I lived on a farm in Wales in a bungalow, so only one floor. So my bedroom was just off the living room. So I was able to run a cable from the back of the video player in the living room, around the room, and into my TV that was sat on my wardrobe in my bedroom, so I could lay in bed and watch films. And because I had a frosted glass window, the remote control would work through the door, so I was able to change the channel on the video player to the channels that played the TV. Easy. This also meant I could watch videos on the small TV as well, unless my mum wanted to watch one of the soaps she recorded earlier. One of the shows that was on that showed a variety of genres was called Movie Drone, which Alex Cock introduced a film, told you a bit about it, and then they would play the film uncut and usually in widescreen, which was very unusual back in those days to have a film in widescreen, especially on the telly. So Movie Drone ran from 1988 to 2000. It showed a variety of films over its seasons. They were usually from the 50s to the 90s, sci-fi, horror, action, could be anything, you never knew. There was also another show called Dr. Terror, that was started in the 90s, and again it did films from the 50s to the 90s. It usually started in the autumn and showing horror films. That's where I saw stuff like Q the Winged Serpent, or the Kolchak films, that got me into those. I think Halloween 78 got a widescreen performance of that show too. Dr. Terror was the only late night horror host that we had in the UK, where the US had many. Another source of films was Channel 4, films again in widescreen and uncut. So a lot of them were horror or violent thrillers or something that had nasty bits in it. This might surprise some younger viewers, but widescreen TVs weren't a thing until the early 90s, and a lot of films were unavailable in that format. I think we got our first widescreen telly in the early 90s. It was a 32-inch widescreen TV, and it probably went back as far as it went sideways. It was massive, and it needed 2 people to carry it, maybe 3. So it wasn't until the late 90s we got satellite TV, and a new era of movie watching started, and dominated for well over 20 years until streaming came along. Well, there we go. Thanks for listening. Here endeth the lesson.